Good morning, and welcome to today's Storms Seminar, Living Schoolyards for Stormwater Management. My name is Jeffrey Albrecht. I'm an engineer at the State Water Board in the Division of Water Quality. I work in our Stormwater Planning Unit where we manage the strategy to optimize resource management of stormwater, aka storms. This is our third storms seminar. We have more we'd like to, we're developing on stormwater management type topics, so please stay tuned. We have a number of great attendees today, so we're hoping that between the folks in the room and the folks joining us via the webcast, we can have a good collaborative discussion and see what kind of partnerships we can create on this topic going forward. Before I go any further, I need to do my obligatory emergency evacuation procedures. For those of you not familiar with our building, please make note of the emergency exits around here. In case of emergency alarm going off, please gather your belongings and your buddy. Make your way calmly out the door and across the courtyard to Cesar Chavez Park, where you can enjoy today's farmers market. After you've purchased some fruits and vegetables and gotten the A-OK, you're welcome to come join us back here. Today, we are doing both a webcast and a recording of this event. So if you do have questions and want to speak, please wait patiently for one of my colleagues who will be walking the aisles during the discussion part to pass you a mic so folks on the webcast can hear you and we get a clear recording of your question. Finally, if you have any cell phone or any noise-making devices, please make sure they're on vibrate now. I want to do a quick framing of today's presentation. First, let's see. I want to say that we are honored to have Assembly Member Phil Ting joining us today as the sponsor for the Assembly resolution designating May as Living Schoolyard Month. I believe that this is a topic he probably holds dear to his heart. We have two great presenters. Sharon Danks is the CEO of Green Schoolyards America and author of Asphalt Ecosystems. And then Jeff Vincent is the Deputy Director and co-founder of the Center for Cities and Schools. Following the presentation, we've allocated about 40 minutes of time to have an open discussion. We will be accepting questions via email from the folks on the webcast. The address for those emails is storms, STORMS, @waterboards.ca.gov. We will be having that same address on the slides for your future reference, but again, it's storms@waterboards.ca.gov. So before we go any further, I want to thank our State Water Board member, Stephen Moore, for joining us today. Give him a chance to welcome you all and to say a few words. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We appreciate all your efforts here working for the State Water Board. Well, good morning. I'm Stephen Moore. I'm a board member on the State Water Board, and I'm thrilled to be here to kick off this seminar on the Living Schoolyards for Stormwater Management. And, you know, I take a real personal stake in this type of initiative, which I'll explain a little bit. But I'm really excited and genuinely, very enthusiastic about unleashing this untapped potential that we have in reinventing our public spaces, including our schools, to be in better harmony with the water cycle. And at the same time, we can supercharge the education of our school children with outdoor learning about water and growing food and ecology. And so schools and stormwater actually figure pretty prominently in my life, as probably many of you. In the water business, we often speak about educating school children as a great investment because school children teach the parents. And during this drought, I have gotten an earful from my 10-year-old and my 12-year-old about saving water, which is great, and I'm sure the little ambassadors around the state have had a huge impact in helping the state achieve a 24% savings in water use compared to 2 years ago. I'm a civil engineer, and I grew up in the Los Angeles Unified School District, where I went to 6 different schools, all with vast landscapes of asphalt and concrete. Growing up in these facilities motivates me to do everything I can to leave these places in better shape than I found them. We can do better for our children. And all of the schools I attended sit atop a vast unused reservoir capacity of groundwater storage that Los Angeles could use to get through extended drought periods in the future. So if the stormwater is captured strategically, as we renovate schools, and inevitably we have to, and we deal with the water infrastructure of water supply, wastewater management, but also drainage, stormwater. We have these opportunities to improve water resources management on a large landscape scale and create educational spaces, living schoolyards, including outdoor classrooms, gardens, and native plant rain gardens that will really improve the day-to-day experience of spending time at school. My wife, Caroline Van Alst, is the president of the Sausalito Marin City School District. So I'm very empathetic about the struggle of schools to meet budgets for facilities which can compete with other educational needs. So I see this area as a place where the state has an important role to play. And part of that role is reminding folks of the high educational value and huge contribution to the educational goals of engaging students in not just science and math, but also art, music, poetry, writing, that the living schoolyards can provide. This is truly a win-win of improved water resources quality and quantity and improved education. It's a wonderful opportunity. As Jeffrey mentioned, earlier this year we adopted at the State Water Board the Stormwater Strategy, which is the strategy to optimize resource management of stormwater, or storms. And this is really an attempt to change the paradigm of how we treat stormwater, not as a hazard or a waste, but as a resource. And I gave some examples about how Los Angeles has opportunities, but we have these things statewide. And we also had a great program called it was called DROPS. It was a Drought Response Outreach Program for schools, which was a one-time amount of money, about $25 million, to actually emphasize stormwater management in schools. You would have thought it might have been for water efficiency, and saving water during the drought, but we saw a great opportunity to take advantage of a long-term water management strategy with these vast public spaces of schools throughout our state. And so we worked with staff who had this great idea to really promote the need for facilities level work. And so we also note that SB 985 recently passed requires stormwater resource plans for locals to develop, and it really prioritizes publicly owned lands for optimizing stormwater capture and reuse. And so our programmatic framework really supports these other more ambitious broad social goals. At this point I want to take the opportunity and the honor to introduce Assembly Member Phil Ting, who has shown leadership in recognizing the potential of schools and the potential we have to really improve them to reinforce education and experience for our children. He was elected to the State Assembly in 2012. He represents the 19th Assembly District in San Francisco and Daly City. And we really acknowledge him as a leading voice in educational reform and reinvestment. And he's helped also, in where I live in the Bay Area today, he's been a leader in restoring San Francisco Bay wetlands. And he sponsored the delightful Assembly Concurrent Resolution 128, which has designated May as Living Schoolyards Month. And graduated from UC Berkeley and that place we call the Stanford of the East, Harvard. I throw that in there. So yes, and he lives today in the Sunset District in San Francisco. And it's my honor to introduce Assembly Member Phil Ting, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moore. I had no idea you thought so little of Harvard. To equate Harvard with the junior colleges, I think is very unfortunate. Well, I'm very proud of my UC, but I'm very proud of my UC affiliation. So, anyways, welcome to Sacramento and welcome to Living Schoolyards Month. Thank you so much for being here and celebrating with us. It's actually very, very exciting. And my own personal journey and personal interest with this is my very first year out I was in the legislature, it was 2013, and I was looking for a bill around urban agriculture, something I was personally interested in. We've been doing a lot of that in San Francisco. And I was the previous assessor, most recently the assessor in San Francisco. So I brought a bill around urban agriculture. We were able to get that passed, AB 551, and it basically allows local cities and local jurisdictions to opt in to preserving vacant lands and blighted lands and actually lowering their property taxes so they could actually keep them as urban ag. Because if you actually took what looks like a pretty ugly asphalted vacant lot, you would be shocked how much the land is worth and how much the property taxes are that you'd have to actually pay on it. So we were able to get that done. During that same time, my daughter had just started kindergarten at Star King Elementary in San Francisco. And San Francisco Unified very proudly has been one of the leaders in the Living Schoolyards movement. And what we had seen is most of the schools had been built fairly early on, turn of the century, really built at a time where we were trying to maximize the playground for our children, and that meant as much asphalt as possible. And it left very little room outside of the fence and the asphalt and maybe a basketball court. That was really what most of our schoolyards looked like. So as we were rethinking our commitment to the environment, and we were trying to do greater greening in San Francisco. We've actually started planting trees. If you've driven through San Francisco, we've actually taken some of our roads that used to be, in my opinion, fairly mundane and done medians and greened them. You've seen sort of those types of boulevards around San Francisco. We've really kind of moved much more that direction. Our schools were also following suit. So during that first year at Star King Elementary, I had a chance to meet with Sharon. Sharon was in charge, working with the school district and sort of re-envisioning our schoolyard. And the reason that was such a sort of seminal moment for the school, it was really a culture shift at the school. Because really, if there had almost been nothing done physically to the school since it was built, I believe in the 1920s or 1930s. The school pretty much looked identical. We hadn't done our ADA upgrade. We just did the ADA upgrade. So as we were doing our ADA upgrade with our bond money, we were thinking, what can we do with our school to make it more green? We had a small gardening program, and we were figuring out how can we expand that. So what we went through was a visioning exercise of what the school would look like. And as part of that visioning exercise, of course, is trying to figure out, well, why is this important? Outside of maybe it just looks nice or aesthetically it's more pleasing. So much of it was raising children in a very urban environment. They almost have no exposure to any agricultural or any environmental aspects of their life. So it was trying to figure out, well, how do we do it to make it interesting, make it fun, but also how do we make them more aware of the environment that we are constantly living in? And of course, if you tell them all the great things that you're trying to accomplish with Living Schoolyards, it's the way to turn off kids immediately. So what you do is you just make it much more interesting, you make it fun, and you hire teachers who are very excited about growing things and plants and all sorts of vegetables. And really it's been such a fun experience. It's been a very communal experience where we as a community have come together to really transform or begin the transformation. It's not done yet, we're about halfway through, to help transform that rectangular piece of asphalt into something that really is closer to a blended environment that kids will want to play in, can actually experiment, can grow things, and actually really evolve. And what we'd love to do is not just see that for our school or my school in San Francisco, Star King, but to really see that for schools all across the country. And what I'm finding is, as my kids have started to learn about growing plants, agriculture, really that link, there's much more appreciation of their food, understanding of their food, but also there's a much more appreciation for the scientific aspect of it. And so I think I'm such a huge fan for Living Schoolyards. We released Superintendent Torlickson's blueprint, was it a year ago? Was it about a year ago? And very excited to, piece by piece, start to implement and really work through finding ways to make that blueprint a reality. But again, without a blueprint, then it really doesn't matter because you have no idea where you're going. So it's exciting to have that blueprint and to make sure that we're getting the resources one by one and school by school to make sure that we're done. So again, thank you so much for being here. Very excited to celebrate May as Living Schoolyards Month, and even more excited about trying to make Living Schoolyards a reality for all our kids. Thank you. I wasn't sure if I was, am I introducing Sharon? Oh, so please, thank you. So next is Sharon Danks, and I had the really distinct honor, I had the distinct honor of working with her directly and seeing her in action. You've, for all of you who are fans, you've obviously seen her book and all the work that she's done, not just in California, but really all around the world, and really being at the leading forethought of how we can transform many of these asphalt schools into a much more natural living environment, and all the easy ways to do it, but also the benefits of doing that. So with that, Sharon Danks.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here with all of you today, and an honor to be asked to speak during Living Schoolyard Month. Thank you so much for coming, Assemblymember Ting. What we've brought for you today is a presentation that I'll be giving a presentation that will introduce kind of the broad range of why living schoolyards are important, what they are around the world, and then a deep dive into how they can be an asset for stormwater management. And then my colleague, Jeff Vincent from the Center for Cities and Schools, will follow up with more of how we might do this in a policy and economic context. My background is as an environmental city planner. That's my training, and I first came to this topic looking at how do we create green cities. We have the knowledge to create green cities, and yet we're not doing it. So it seemed to me to be a consensus issue, and one that we needed to start with young children to get them to understand how ecological systems work, so that they understand when they're not working and they can ask for them to be fixed. And we need to bring together people from all different disciplines to do that work. So I've been pursuing that type of topic for the last 18 years. I am the co-founder and principal of Bay Tree Design in Berkeley, California, with my business partner, Lisa Howard, who's a landscape architect, and we designed about 60 different schoolyard master plans, mostly in California, over the years. In 2010, I co-founded with colleagues Cam Collier and Mary Jackson from Canada and England, an organization called the International School Grounds Alliance, which is an effort to bring together the best research, latest practices in this field around the world. And so what I'll be sharing with you today are not only my slides from my visits to some of the places that my colleagues live, but also the thinking that goes into this field around the world. And I'm also the founder of a new nonprofit that's 2 years old called Green Schoolyards America. And we seek to create as many green schoolyards as we can, essentially. And our mission is to inspire and enable communities across the United States to enrich their school grounds and use them to improve children's well-being, learning, and play while contributing to the ecological health and resilience of cities. Basically, we're trying to improve the environment for children and cities at the same time using public land. Our work as a nonprofit ranges from research to outreach to policy. We're working with colleagues at Occidental College on a cost-benefit analysis of citywide green schoolyard systems, and starting a study of playground surface temperatures to look at how all of this asphalt is affecting local climate. We're also involved in providing professional development for principals to support this type of systems in their school district. We give a lot of lectures and try to connect partners who are already interested in this field and have had the opportunity to engage on a number of different policy threads. So what's the need for this work? I think that this graphic, which appeared in an article in England in a publication in 2007 by David Derbyshire, really sums it up. It's an aerial photograph of a city in England, but I imagine that it could be anywhere. 4 generations of the same family are shown in this diagram, and the bubbles that you see represent the area that an 8-year-old child could walk by themselves in their own generation. So the biggest bubble there is the great-grandfather George, who at age 8 was allowed to walk 6 miles from his house over the river through the woods. His child, Jack, in the 50s, could walk about a mile on his own through the woods. His child, Vicky, at age 8 in the late 70s, could go down the swimming pool about half a mile away. And the current 8-year-old can basically go to the end of the block. So children have lost their place in cities over time. And we, as a society, all over the world this is happening, don't really internalize that to the degree as it passes through the generations. We know what our parents did, perhaps, but we're not really aware what our grandparents and great-grandparents did. And so what I see when I look at this is that society needs to shift what we allow children to do and based on what we have done in the past. But what I also see is that kids have lost the ability to have challenge and adventure and self-directed play and all the things, confidence building, and that comes with making your own way in a city. And so for me, the place that kids go every day is schools. And that means that schools have a mandate, really, to be able to provide those real life skills and physical and social learning that happened in years past on their own in the world. And what we give them is frequently something like this. This is Schoolyard, could be anywhere in the state, in our cities. This particular one has since been remodeled, thankfully, but it shows you, I think, the unrealized potential of our school grounds. And this has had consequences also for health. It has, we've seen that over the last 30 or 40 years that physical activity of children has dropped, and we see medical conditions arise. We also see mental health issues arise with lack of access to nature, and we are also seeing dangerous temperatures in hot weather on playgrounds, which will only get worse as climate shifts. But change is possible. This is a picture from Chilliwack Park Child Development Center in San Francisco, a project that inspired the city to try to change all of its schools for the better. So in 1991, the schoolyard looked like this, and watch those buildings in the background, because they'll disappear as change happens. This is 2001 and 2007, the same place, right? So not only is that a better environment, but what does this say about how adults value kids socially, right? This says this is not a message of care to children. This says children are one of our lowest priorities. Whereas this says children are important, we care about you. This is a nurturing place for kids. So we aim to do this for all children. My colleague in Japan, Dr. Ko Senda, sums it up. He's a designer, fabulous designer, and he says his end goal is always to design for children's happiness. And I think that should be our goal too. So what we have now, our 21st century education model trying to fit into a design made for the 1940s, preparing kids for World War II. That's not what we're doing now, right? So we need to shift that to be able to tie into the Common Core and NGSS curriculum. We also have major equity issues, green space in cities that are not in the places where lower income children are. If we put green space in every school, every child will have access to nature every day. This is significant. School districts are one of the biggest land managers in every city, and choices that they make are important and impact their community, and they're often left out of, school districts are often left out of green city planning efforts by their cities. There's a whole lot of land. Jeff Vincent has calculated that there's 125,000 acres of school ground land in California alone, and we have 6.2 million kids on that land that could be having a better environment. So to do this, we need collaboration. There's a lot of interrelated issues: water, community, habitat, air, education, health, climate. And to create resilient cities, we need to collaborate to address these complex problems. And we can do so on the common ground of schools. We can put green infrastructure there that produces the multiple benefits of enriching education and improving local ecological systems at the same time, while inspiring the next generation of kids to be environmental stewards and to connect to their place. So what are living schoolyards exactly? I'll show you in pictures. But in words, living schoolyards are richly layered outdoor environments on school grounds that strengthen local ecological systems while providing place-based hands-on learning resources for children and youth of all ages. They're child-centered places that foster exploration, adventure, and a wide range of play and social opportunities while enhancing the well-being and health and engaging the community. And so I'll show you a brief snapshot of these different areas that living schoolyards can touch on. Interdisciplinary outdoor learning would be the first. This example, Coombs School in England, is one of my favorites. It's a model in Europe that's been developed continuously over the last 40 years, 37 years of which were under the direction of Principal Sue Humphreys, who at this school that didn't have extra resources, didn't have anything different from most public schools except her determination and the support of her faculty, shifted their environment and changed their educational program to relate to their place. And so what you're seeing here are children playing under the shade of a tree planted by children years ago. And in the branches of the tree, hanging from the tree, are these little wooden spoon people that the kids made the clothes for, but they also watched an artist turn the spoons from wood taken down from their site. Because they have a 2-acre site, and Sue believes that every child should plant a tree before they leave. And because it's only a 2-acre site, they also need to cut one down. So then they use that wood, they teach sustainable harvesting, they do that in their art projects. And this is what a child-planted forest looks like 30 years down the road, with wood mulch on the ground from the forest and chairs to sit on from the forest as well. They have 3 ponds on the site to teach water safety because England is an island and everyone needs to know about how to be safe at the water's edge. We also have a lot of water in the Bay Area and throughout California, of course, and it's important everywhere. And when they have a pond, and in this case, the ducks live across the schoolyard and they were brought out for the special occasion to go swimming in the pond, they can celebrate that journey with art. They also, at the preschool, at the school, do a lot of water play, which you can think of as play, or you can think of as understanding fluid dynamics and gravity, right? And then children being children, when the puddles result at the end of those gutters, they're allowed to play in them. They bring extra clothes if they get dirty. They get to explore all of their senses in this school ground. In this picture, you're looking at one of the experiential learning projects that they have, which is about all those trees that were planted on the site. They have all different types of wood, and in the foreground are willow trees hung with willow baskets. In the background, there was a walnut tree hung with a bed frame, and an oak tree hung with a chair, and a pine tree with a door frame. And they had artists in to do demonstrations of carving and making things from wood. They want kids to be makers of their space. And so in this example, they had just seen an artist make things out of willow, and so they were making a willow structure for their own garden when I was there. They also have the most incredible geology exhibit I've ever seen at a school, and this is an interpretive display for it. They have a map of the UK there with photographs of rocks that came from all over the whole country. And the story of the rock, was it part of the old port wall that was assembled in 1600? Was it a piece of a millstone from an old mill? It's got the history, the geology, and the location of that rock. And then out in the school grounds, you see what they built with it. And for them, Stonehenge is their local place. So this is Coombs Henge, their outdoor classroom, and also the play environment at recess. So as you can see, these types of rich environments have incredible academic benefits. They really help kids engage with their work. You do see enhanced academic performance, and even having views of nature has been shown in studies to improve children's performance. What you also get in general, moving on to other case studies here, is experiential learning, focusing on letting kids do things themselves rather than being told about how something works. They experience it. All different kinds of hands-on curricula are possible from preschool up through 12th grade. Making nature visible is a very key part of this. It's a way to expose the water cycle for the kids to see themselves, seasonal change, native plants, migrations, passage of time, geology, these abstract and faraway sounding concepts that you can make real for kids on site. All kinds of science curriculum easily woven in. Things like measurement can be embedded in surfaces of the walls or the ground or tabletops. Philosophy that a school wants to share with children can be written on the walls. You can have spaces to read to kids, practice foreign languages, do art projects that are led by an artist so they have a unified theme and are equally appealing to adults and children when they're done. And you can make education very place-based and relevant and build ecological literacy through connection to your own environment's natural, cultural, and geographic context. These living schoolyards are also very valuable for recreation, and that includes all the traditional sports games and play structures, but it also includes giving kids permission to be a little bit more active in child-centered ways that they make up themselves. There are ways to design schoolyards that invite kids to run through them. Pathways, for example, themselves provide kids with a reason to go somewhere. And so there's been studies done on places with no pathways have far less physical activity than places that have a loop or that have a loop with path cut-throughs and different levels. Dr. Mitsuru Senda in Japan has done some great research on that. This schoolyard in Germany is an illustration of that. Physical fitness also is the result when you have enriched environments. This is a school outside of Tokyo, and it's recess. You can see some boys are playing basketball. There's a whole group of children up on the hill looking for dragonflies. They have little things to catch them with and study them temporarily and then release them. And in the background, other children are riding unicycles. Right? So there's all different types of things. This is an elementary school. There are opportunities for children to initiate their own creative play. Sandboxes and water are one of the best investments any school can put in for preschool and elementary school because they invite collaboration to build large things together. Nature play exploration. This is another school outside of Tokyo with children exploring dragonflies at recess. They also raise a vast number of dragonflies so that there are plenty there for them to look at. Health and well-being issues are interrelated. Shade and microclimate variety, having places for kids to go out of the direct sun is important, and that can take many different shapes. Nutrition and edible gardens, very popular in California, definitely a health benefit for kids to eat a wider variety of foods, and to manage these sites with organic practices. It's also quite important for all schools to have places for mental health and relaxation, places that kids who are just having a hard day or teachers having a hard day can go, but also there are a lot of kids in the inner city who are dealing with a lot of trauma in their lives, and these places are restorative, research shows, and very important. There are also things that you can do to encourage mental health benefits, like having a sense of accomplishment and self-confidence. Those are things you can't teach from a book. Having a place for kids to try something and achieve it. The picture of the boy climbing on the bamboo is a standard preschool play element in every preschool in Japan, and it's probably not allowed even for our 12-year-olds. But all 3-year-olds in Japan can do that. So the physical health benefits, again, are many, and the Children in Nature Network has compiled a great list. I won't go through them all here, but kids do gain physically from these environments, and they also gain mentally from these environments. There's great mental health benefits, improving focus, confidence, supportive skills, and social groups, better attention, increased positive social behaviors, all the things we want to see. So, but we also can influence the environment in and around our schools. And when our districts do this work district-wide, we get infrastructure scale effects. And projects can also be designed to be demonstration scale or infrastructure scale on their own site. So for me, that means this example of the small solar panel here in Berkeley at a school drives the pond pump system, was built by a parent group that I took part in, and it drives a fountain that shoots out of the rock. So when the kids have the panel facing toward the sun, it goes, and when they turn it away, it stops. And they can understand solar energy quite well. I see them bringing their parents over to talk about it very often. So this is a demonstration scale project. At the same school, on the rooftop, is a large array of PV panels that I think, if I remember correctly, provide about 1/3 of the school's energy. And so that starts to offset the school's impact on the surrounding environment. The wind turbine next to it in England provides all of the energy that that school uses in a year. So there are ways to change the school's impact on its place, and that's what we really want to see. Natural and salvage materials, I think kids in cities in particular always are touching man-made materials, asphalt, glass, metal, plastic. So the more we can put wood, stone, and plants in their environment, the better. And also to go beyond recycling and the messages of recycling to look at reuse and how you can reuse things in beautiful ways. Here you see millstones as part of a fence and old broken up plates in a mosaic in a school. If you go up closely, you can see the china patterns. An old sidewalk is that seat wall. In Sweden, this place called St. Hansgarten, it's the public after-school program for the city, the public school system in the city of Lund. This is their permaculture after-school center's barn, which is great in and of itself that the public school system has a permaculture program. But this site was physically built by middle school students as their after-school program. And it would have gotten LEED Platinum had LEED Platinum been around at the time this was built. They're way ahead of us. So it's a really wonderful, fabulous place. Light clay walls, living roof, all materials taken apart from, reassembled from other locations as well. Incredible place. Wildlife habitat is also something that can be fostered on school grounds. And every school, I think, can be putting in things to augment butterfly habitat and bird habitat, pretty much no matter where they are. Schools can also be teaching empathy for wildlife and understanding of other beings' perspectives. And so this project in Sweden is an outdoor classroom space designed for a school, but it's in an adjacent park. And it's meant to be like a bird nest up in a tree. And so the class ascends to the top of this structure and has class up in the treetops so that they can feel like a bird and get some of that higher experience, changing of perspective. Schools in the Midwest are experimenting with different habitat types, including prairie. This one is in the city of Chicago itself, and it's a small relatively small patch of prairie. And what interests me about it in particular is that prairie is not equally beautiful to everyone's eye. It has tall grasses that could look unruly to some. So what they've done is brilliant. They surround it by an attractive fence, and they put artwork in the middle of it that says, "We meant to do that," so that any naysayers understand it's intentional. At a larger scale, many schools in Wisconsin, Indiana, and other places are putting in large-scale prairie restorations, and this is one that's on the infrastructure scale that has the ability to create a very large patch of prairie habitat. The whole school, I think, is out here planting, and this is what something like that looks like when it grows up, to be in that place as an outdoor classroom space. And those schools in the Midwest also burn their prairie and do the rest of the ecological cycle for it. They, of course, have the fire department come and supervise that process, but it does happen, and I think that's important, and they bring kids to see it. Here in the Bay, in California and in the Bay Area, in Petaluma, the Casa Grande High School has had a program, I think since the 80s, that's absolutely incredible. They have a fish hatchery. They're one of, I believe, only 2 in the state that are licensed to raise endangered steelhead. And they managed to take out dams. Adobe Creek had been dry for 100 years, and the high schoolers convinced all of the landowners along the creek to take out their dams and let water return. And then they built a hatchery to take care of the fish, to raise fish, release them in the bay, and let them swim up. So they did all that restoration work, and they have this hatchery, and they now can count returns. And it has inspired a lot of those kids to become marine biologists, and it's just a phenomenal program. So stormwater, where does this fit in with green infrastructure systems? In my mind, one of the best examples in the world is Berlin. They're one of the leaders in this field. Their context is interesting in that they get 100% of their drinking water from their groundwater, so they're very careful about their groundwater and about recharging that groundwater as much as they can. They do a lot of rainwater harvesting, and they find that rainwater is best stored as groundwater rather than cisterns. It's more expensive in cisterns. So they have the Berlin Water Act and the Rainwater Exemption Ordinance that after 2000 tied stormwater fees to stormwater discharge. So basically schools and other entities that get fined for sending any of their water off-site. So their goal is to infiltrate 100%. And so all across the city of Berlin, they are trying to greatly reduce or eliminate their stormwater runoff, maximize infiltration and retention. And I think there's about 400 schools that have done this. I haven't visited them all, but I brought a couple here to show you what that looks like when a school fully remodels its grounds. This one, right in the heart of Berlin, has a building that has many fingers. So this is one of the courtyard, kind of three-sided courtyards that's entirely permeable pavers and plantings and outdoor classroom space. And they do a lot of paving like this. They also have sports fields, and they drain to an infiltration system. This used to be an entirely asphalted regular schoolyard. And now it's incredible forest playground for kids. So not only does the watershed benefit, but kids have some of the best play environments in the world. And when I was there and I talked to the teachers about this, and we Americans in the group said, how do you supervise in this environment? They said, well, when we had the same question when we started, but when we put the plants in, they were little sticks. And it took them 5 years to get big and vegetated, and we had time to adapt our management strategy. So it wasn't a problem. And what we find now is the side benefit of children's conflict resolution skills have greatly improved. They decide not to bring us their problems. They only bring us their problems if they're big. So we stand here by the tree, and only the big problems come to us, and they solve their own smaller problems, so actually everyone else is happier. Teachers don't have to worry about the details, and kids get to do their own thing. And in schools here that are concerned about stranger danger and seeing adults hiding in the bushes, you can always prune up the bottom 2 feet, so you can watch the feet walking behind the plants, but kids still have a sense of enclosure. So I think this is quite possible and a goal we should be looking at here. They also, this is the same school, have a lot of sand, a lot of natural materials. Their health department encourages physical play, believes that, they're tired of ensuring adults with no balance who trip and fall and break a hip at 65, and they believe you can prevent that by teaching kids to look down, making every surface a different texture and height. So you have to watch where you're going when you're young. That translates to lifelong health. And they also encourage this type of jumping and behavior. At another school in Berlin, they've shaped also a previously all asphalt site into a contoured landscape with a central swale. And the central swale has big, loose rocks that the kids requested, and in the 10 years or so that they've had it, have not had a problem with that. And at the head of that swale, there's also a water feature where the kids can pump water and play with sand. But when it rains, all of the water drains to the swale and goes into the groundwater. And they do also have integrated play structures in their schoolyard as well. This other school in Berlin has a stormwater wetland outdoor classroom space. It's quite lovely. And swale system that runs by it that takes rooftop stormwater across the site in a way that kids can see the rain moving, so that it's an art feature that brings watershed function into kids' lifestyle and understanding. And it has some interesting features along the way, those rocks that must make the water do more interesting things than just flow straight. And the rest of the site is also permeable. Looks like this in some places, like this around the classroom spaces. And then the children's play area, again, sand. And they encourage children climbing on top of those rocks and jumping off. That's part of the philosophy of healthy lifestyle. And then the same school has a living roof as well to slow down the stormwater and help it to infiltrate later. Sweden is also working on things like this. This is a school in Malmö, and you can see that there is a living roof in the background, a green schoolyard project in the foreground there. This particular school backs up against a park, and it has a really interesting design that has integrated the drainage system of the school and the park. And so throughout the campus, there are a variety of living roofs that slow down the storm drainage. A lot of places to infiltrate stormwater, permeable surfaces. And then they do a lot of stormwater conveyance in runnels that kids can see, so that it takes the stormwater directly from the rooftops down the downspouts and then into those surface drains, surface conveyance systems. And then after it leaves that area, it travels around the campus in these more artful curves. And then you can see in the distance there with the girl with the blue, there's also a tiered seating area that is a dry detention pond that fills up when it rains temporarily. And then it either drains into the ground or goes to the storm drain network. They also have this other multi-purpose dry detention pond that they have a basketball court in the center of, but you can see that there's about a 6-inch lip, 8-inch lip around the side. So that entire surface is an overflow area for the previous one as well. And it also takes direct roof drainage from the building that's adjacent. And then in the park, this is the back of the school and the park. The park itself is contoured to absorb stormwater, as you can see there. And the stormwater is directed through a vegetated swale into that little pocket of trees where there is an artful, relaxing seating area, but it's also a stormwater retention basin. And so these things are quite compatible with students enjoying, and the public enjoying the park and the school, and also greatly improves the infrastructure, green infrastructure for the site. Taiwan is also doing a really good job with water. This school is in the mountains next to Taipei. And the principal here is showing me his stormwater collection system. There are 16 cisterns that collect enough water to flush all of the toilets in his building. And they have great interpretive signage all around the building in both English and Chinese. And the rest of the site looks like this. Again, permeable paving with a different aesthetic flavor for Taiwan. But what you're seeing there is also a piece of a creek that flows through their site in the foreground, and in the background, they're the only school, I think, in Taiwan that has a natural hot spring. And so that one in the background there is kept at 6 inches during the school day, but on the weekend, the families can plug it and make it a nicer height for families to gather and use the hot spring as well. And then they have constructed wetlands to treat some of the water, improve stormwater purification. And the playground is permeable as well, and it has a creek running through it that's part of recess play environment. So they're protecting the habitat and playing in it. A different school in Taipei, central Taipei, has a gray water treatment system in their schoolyard as part of they have outdoor hand washing sinks. After you play outside, you need to wash your hands. So they have these outdoor hand washing sinks, and each tank above the sink is a different piece of a living machine that takes the water and purifies it as it goes through the tanks. And then it goes through a filter underground, and then after that, it comes out for play. And this principal is showing us how much fun it is to shoot that water across the schoolyard, because it's really hot in Taipei, and I think the kids get really wet, and that's fine in their environment. And then that water that she's shooting goes into this big runnel where it can soak into the ground as well. So moving to the United States, Virginia Beach is doing some great things with LEED Platinum design, and this is an example of a high school building that was designed with stormwater in mind, and you can see the integrated building and site with major stormwater storage capacity, infiltration, detention, retention capacity, and improvement, purification as well. And they have interwoven pathways and seating areas and kind of the high architectural approach to doing this work. That same school has living roof that is accessible for classes on the second floor. Moving to Washington, D.C., Sidwell Friends School, where Obama's kids went, has a black water purification system at their site. And that means that their school's toilets flush into a system that's purified on site. A lot of that takes place in the basement away from the people. And then the rest of when the water passes that initial purification, it comes up onto the front entrance of the school and goes through a 3-tiered constructed wetland for black water treatment. And so you're looking at that tiered system right now. And when the water is purified, it could be released, meets a higher standard, I believe, than you need to release it to the storm drain network, but instead they dye it blue and use it in the toilet system again. So this school is saying to the public, we value environmental protection, and here it is for you to see, which is pretty exciting. Moving to Sonoma County, creek stewardship. Many of our schools in Sonoma have creeks through them, and when they do, they also celebrate those, integrate them in the curriculum, use the bank edges, protecting wildlife. This school has a bridge across it here, but there is also another school that has a salmon viewing platform that the kids can watch the salmon jump up right in that spot that crosses their school. So they're pretty exciting to have that in your schoolyard. In San Francisco, there's a program called Tap the Sky that has been working on rainwater harvesting for use with garden irrigation. Here's one example of that. And it was established in 2010, and they've done 28 rainwater harvesting systems in San Francisco public schools, and the combined capacity is about 40,000 gallons right now. It's led by Kat Sawyer and has partners of Sustainable, SFUSD, Education Outside, and other organizations, and the funding for it, much of it has come from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission's Urban Watershed Stewardship Community Challenge Grants, which is great. Also in San Francisco, the school district, as Assemblymember Ting was talking about, this is his children's school right after installation. None of the plants have been put in yet in these pictures. But this school's focus of their green schoolyard design was on stormwater detention, retention, and purification, made a little bit more complicated by the soils, which are serpentine soils. And so this is, again, right after planting, but you can see that they've broken up the asphalt, started to make areas where kids are going to be able to play in the plants on the edges, and that those will infiltrate water as well. Phase 1 was just constructed in 2015, and they're designed to achieve 14% detention, 40% retention of the 2-year, 24-hour storm, and they use line bioretention features in the schoolyard due to the serpentine soil. And there will also be, I believe, the district's first rainwater harvesting for toilet flushing system in the brand new building, and that cistern's not yet installed, but I think it will go in this summer, a 5,000 gallon tank that's expected to collect 35,000 gallons in a year. And the collaborators on that are San Francisco Unified School District, Bay Tree Design, 450 Architects, and Sandus, and the funding comes from San Francisco Unified's Prop A Green Schoolyard Bond Program and the San Francisco PUC's Watershed Stewardship Grant. So what's the big picture? To me, it's about planning for climate change resilience, stormwater management, and children's well-being at the same time. Those are goals we can achieve together. Focusing on the long-term climate change issue while responding to the drought, and showcasing schools as centers of innovation so kids will learn about these things by doing them and living them. I also think that we should be prioritizing kids in the places where we do spend our water. We have limited water moving forward, but kids should be a priority for where we decide to use that water. And unpaving the greatest amount we can in their environments, and investing our water in shade trees to cool the schoolyards, and planting strategically to shade children themselves, buildings and pavement. So how do these come about? Participatory design is the way that we most like to see this happen, because then if people are involved in planning, they internalize the project, have a lot more ownership for it, and get a lot more out of it and stay involved in taking care of it. So it's involving the whole community. That often starts with a brainstorming process, showing schools a slideshow, something like this, of what else is happening around the world, asking the full faculty, the PTA, and the children what it is they'd like to be able to do on their school grounds, setting up some goals, prioritizing, voting on those things. Walking the site, seeing what's already out there. What needs to change, what's working, what's not. And then design workshops for both adults and children to take the ideas that were brainstormed and work together in groups to find places for them. Children have great ideas about what they'd like to see. And when you look at their pictures, they're really drawing a lot of integrated environment and learning and physical activity that adults miss, I think, a lot of the time. And they also draw the circuits that Professor Senda suggests promote the most physical activity. And when you ask them about their pictures, they say, well, I'm going to go take this path and go by the pond and then jump off the rock and then climb the ladder to the fort and then go through the tunnel. And they have this whole pathway system. So this is a typical picture from an elementary school student. And so our firm, Bay Tree Design, takes this information, puts it together into a master plan, brings it to the community and says, this is what we think we heard you say you'd like. And we work on it until there's a consensus about the direction of the future school. And a master plan is a consensus document. It lets the school community figure out which parts they're going to do first, which parts they're going to do second, and how it all fits together. And then they choose typically a place to work on first. This is an example from a school we worked on in San Francisco that had, before construction, the area looked like this. And then right after the contractors left, the contractors did all of the heavy work, taking out asphalt, putting in rocks, things that take cranes. And then the school community came through and started to plant. This was right at the very beginning of planting. But there's already, in this picture, you can see kids doing a different type of play in nature as opposed to the sports. There's still space for sports off to the right, but kids can do nature exploration in this area. And after the initial build out, this is a different school, but there's continued engagement about how you're going to detail out different parts of the site. So at this school, the children there are working with the science teacher to figure out the location of the pond I showed you earlier with the little solar panel. They were moving a paper pond around the space to get a sense of where it went. And there's also ongoing stewardship. Most schools in this who have living schoolyards work out an arrangement with their school district, so the school district doesn't have to take on all of the maintenance that results from this increasingly complex environment. It's usually shared in some way. Heavier things done by the district, smaller things like raking and weeding by the parents and kids. And that's probably, most schools have quarterly work days. And so some of the statewide, we're gaining ground on this topic in California. It's exciting to say. And there are a number of initiatives, some of which were already talked about in the introductions. So I'll be quick here, but Assemblymember Phil Ting's resolution I think is fabulous. And the part that he didn't mention is that the language also, it does declare May to be Living Schoolyard Month. So happy Living Schoolyard Month, everyone. And it urges school districts around the state to prioritize the design and construction of student-accessible green space on school campuses and to integrate the use of the space into the teaching of standards-based curriculum. So, and it also passed, everyone who voted on it in the California state government voted yes. So it also has a strong support in the concepts, and the language is nicely written. So Living Schoolyard Month, when it was created in 2014, first celebrated last year, 2015, my organization, Green Schoolyards America, created a document to help schools use their grounds, and it's available for free online on our website at greenschoolyards.org. It's the Living Schoolyard Activity Guide, and the California edition of the guide has contributions written by 55 different organizations, public agencies, and museums across the state, and has really fabulous ideas from camping in your schoolyard to science lessons. Right? So I encourage you to take a look at it. There are two companions to this too, one written by organizations in the Midwest and one written by organizations around the world. So you can find out what they do in Indonesia or Sweden in those. And it's also based on an international celebration from the International School Grounds organization called International School Grounds Month, also in May. So the California Department of Education has gotten involved with the Blueprint for Environmental Literacy, and I was on the Environmental Literacy Task Force that helped to work on this document along with others in this room. And it was published in September 2015 by the CDE Foundation, and it provides a framework for teaching environmental literacy across the state. And I'm really pleased that it also includes a connection to using the outdoors both on and off site in education. And so I think that's possibly a first in the documentation. Prop 84, also very important, it was mentioned earlier, provided grants of $82 million. Some of them were awarded to schools. And I just have an example of one of those schools that received the funding. This one is in Oakland, a before shot. And then the after shot of the same site that was just, I think this installation was last week. And so it's underway. And this particular project created the Sausal Creek Nature Area Bay-Friendly Schoolyard at Sequoia School, and it replaced 2,300 square feet of asphalt with permeable surface, bioswales, sheet mulching that built soil and helps water retention. And it's got multi-purpose design for nature play, community gathering, education, habitat, and it's got 81% native plants. So it's a great demonstration. And the partners on this were the Oakland Unified School District's Facilities Department, the Sequoia School Community, Bay Tree Design, and Stop Waste. DROPS grant program, also wonderful and a great boost in the state for this work to connect stormwater and children. State Water Resources Control Board put this program together, and it also promotes multi-benefit projects that reduce stormwater pollution, increase retention, use, and recharge, conserve water, and includes educational components. And this is an example of a DROPS grant award designated school that hasn't yet been built, but you can see the need, and it's really exciting that they will be receiving the funds to change it. And then Prop 1 that was mentioned earlier, created the Stormwater Grant Program from Assembly Bill 1471, and that one has $200 million in grant funds for multi-benefit stormwater management projects, including the use of existing publicly owned land, and school grounds are eligible. This is a brand new program. The guidelines were released in December 2015. I think it really has great potential for schools. I would love to see schools apply. And then finally, climate change mitigation, I think, is an area that hasn't yet been involved quite as much as it could. AB 32 has money, $1 billion they're making of investment in cap and trade funds to mitigate climate change, and schools are currently not eligible for some reason. And so there's ongoing advocacy around that, but I would love to see schools be able to apply for the money to do things like take out asphalt and put in trees. So how do we transform this vision into action? I think it's all about collaboration. Creating healthy, ecological, resilient cities is no longer a technical issue. We know how to build them. What we need now is the collaboration, partnerships, and consensus to bring this about. There's value in doing this. It builds understanding and stewardship capacity while repairing ecosystems. It makes children understand that they're change makers, that even though they're 5, they may not be able to affect the rainforest far away, but they can improve the habitat for butterflies or help the rain soak into the ground at their own school. So green infrastructure on school grounds plus education for eco-literacy is an investment in the future we should make. And we need a common vision, a collaborative approach, and everyone's support and participation. Thank you. Bye. One last transformation there. So I think we're going to hold questions until the end, right? And we'll segue into Jeff Vincent's presentation from the Center for Cities and Schools.
Okay. Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for sticking around, and thank you, Sharon. Let me switch this. You know, Sharon's a tough act to follow. It's, I mean, how wonderful. Do we all feel wonderful or what? I mean, I would live in any of those environments. They're beautiful, and I would love to have my children in those environments. And so, so thank you for presenting those. I mean, they're beautiful and they're wonderful. And frankly, every child in California, every child in the U.S. should go to school in those environments. Every child in the world should have the opportunity to go to school in those environments. And what I like about what Sharon has presented is that it's not just about stormwater, or it's not just about bees having habitat or something like that. It's really connected to learning and activity of young people. And personally, I find that to be enormously compelling and frankly, one of the really key imperatives. So my role here is really to help kickstart the conversation. You know, Sharon's really the main act in terms of, you know, the showing these wonderful examples. And what I would like to do is sort of follow that with some of the work that we have done thinking about K-12 school facilities as infrastructure, and in this case, as green infrastructure, to start us thinking about how do we scale these so all children can have this, you know, how does this relate to funding, how does this relate to policy in California? And so hopefully what my comments will do is help you have even more questions and more interest in figuring this out. And so I'll tell you about myself in a second, but you know what I want to sort of leave you with in terms of the comments that I make is that we're at a point in California where there's major shifts going on in school infrastructure funding. And when I say school infrastructure, I mean school facilities and grounds. Infrastructure is a little bit more of a sexy word, although it's arguable when you say school facilities. So we're really in major shifts, and I want to talk to you about that in a second because I think it has a lot of implications for local implementation of these kinds of projects and strategies. Point a little bit to the role of standards and guidelines on this from the state, and then point to a few opportunities that I see for this to really embed it into either state policy and or local work at local school districts in particular. And I will say that, one of the nice things about being invited to this is that my sense is that it will help a cross-sector conversation up here in Sacramento between different state agencies. And I will say and put them on notice is that my good friends from the California Department of Education are here who work in the facility division, and they really, I invite them, of course, as I always do, to correct anything that I say or provide deeper insight, as they're really the experts on kind of, what districts are doing with their facilities and how they're trying to improve them every day and what they're spending on them and and specifically what the state of California's design standards or design guidelines or suggestions, recommendations, et cetera, are on both our buildings on our campus as well as the grounds. Also, some colleagues from the Health and All Policies Task Force are here who have been working on these issues as well, and we'll get into that. So, first of all, about myself, I am an urban planner. That's what I affiliate with, and I'm very interested in the kinds of things that Sharon's talking about, particularly for young people in our cities and our metropolitan environments. And so about 10 or 12 years ago at UC Berkeley, we started the Center for Cities and Schools. And it's really made up of urban planning researchers and education policy researchers, really looking at how you make strong cities and successful young people. Because really what we see is those things are super interdependent and very connected. And we in particular have been interested in how do we close what's been called the opportunity gap, right? In education circles, we've talked for many decades about the achievement gap, right? Which, as you know, has been measured in terms of test scores and things like that. But what we know in looking at children's lives and their life trajectories in terms of where they come from, the opportunities that they've had, the schooling that they've had, et cetera, is that a lot of the differences in young people that we see is really due to what's been called the opportunity gap. And those are largely the things that happen outside of school, right? Did you live in a safe neighborhood, right? Was it safe and healthy, and were you in stable housing? Did you have access to transportation so you could get around to school, so you could get to after-school activities, so you could get to other care or enrichment activities? And so all of these issues that are sort of outside the purview of school districts, right, matter a lot to children. And so what we do at the Center for Cities and Schools is really look at those built environment aspects as they relate to opportunity and success for young people and families. And so we've done a lot of work on school facilities. It's something that I've been very interested in, and how do we have high quality, equitable learning environments for all of our public school children in particular. We've done a lot of work on regional sustainable communities planning. I think SB 375 and kind of related things, and AB 32 was mentioned up there, but where do schools all fit in that? Because as Sharon said, there are very prevalent public infrastructure places in our communities. We have about, give or take, 10,000 schools in the state. She said 125,000 acres across the state. And as you know, these are all over the place throughout our communities. But they're, public school campuses are probably our most prevalent public space across the state. And working on issues around housing, because we know that housing issues and sort of the integration of neighborhoods and those kinds of things obviously has a deep relationship to where children go to school and who's sitting in what school, and of course transportation, as I mentioned, and then a big piece of the work that we do is engaging young people in city and regional planning or local community development issues. And we've developed a strategy and methodology called the Y Plan, which works with high school students usually. Sometimes we work at the elementary level as well, but works with the students and their teachers on real community development, urban planning problems. And we get client partners who might be a city, they might be a developer, might be a school board, others. And the students really study that issue, whether it's park redevelopment, whether it's transit redesign, or housing redevelopment issue on a specific site, and the students study that and then they make recommendations to the client from a youth perspective about what should happen. But it's getting to that piece of like real world kind of learning and problem solving, which I think is really at the heart of what Sharon's talking about as well. But in that, we're really looking for what are the promising practices and the policies and the strategies that increase opportunity for all children. And we do that through applied engaged policy research. And usually that's in partnership with various public agencies or other kind of advocates working on various issues. And so the way in which we see school facilities is really, Sharon kind of mentioned it, public schools is public infrastructure, right? And we don't, and I think that's got a lot of facets that we don't always acknowledge, but one is that their education infrastructure, obviously, to where the vast majority of the formal teaching and learning happens, right? So they support the education program, and as Sharon alluded to, they also enhance school quality and health, the environmental health aspects of what's there. They're also social infrastructure, right? They're, as I mentioned, they're these very prevalent public spaces, but a lot of things happen on school campuses, right? You vote. We're getting ready to vote soon. You'll probably go to a school to vote. Lots of community meetings happen. You may play basketball or something on the weekends or after school, right? So they're really these kind of social hubs, these places that people do a lot of things outside of the 9 to 3:30 bell, right? So there's a lot of uses that go on there. They really serve as neighborhood assets. And then, of course, their physical infrastructure, and there's all kinds of implications and ramifications of that. And really, I'm just touching the surface here, but there's been a lot of talk about where do we build new schools? Right? Are we building them in green fields that are not on the fringe, that aren't accessible, multimodal accessible? That impacts travel patterns. It impacts the VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and all these other kind of goals and objectives that the state of California has. They obviously impact, as physical infrastructure, impact play. And then to the point of stormwater and kind of related environmental issues, they obviously are a key piece of, or can be a key piece of green infrastructure. So it probably really does matter how much water is shedding off of those sites and how much water is not. And I think that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the various green infrastructure pieces related to schools. So all of that being said, I'm going to get a little technical on you here, but bear with me. I think the core funding around this infrastructure is really important. And so what's going on in California right now is that we're in an uncertain future of school infrastructure funding. And let me describe that for a second, and then we'll kind of move on. And I'll talk about why it's important. But so in terms of, we've got, the school infrastructure, we've got 10,000 school campuses across the state. We don't actually know exactly how many buildings we have. But if you look at the infrastructure spending, and this is from a study that we did a couple of years ago for the California Department of Education, and if you look at this bar here is really kind of totaling up about $118 billion that was spent over roughly a 13, 14-year period on school construction and what's called modernization. But that's basically like major upgrades to school campuses, right? So you can see the big buckets here is that, about $118 billion that we could calculate. The bottom there is state bonds. So states put up bond funds for school districts to use for construction of new facilities and renovations of older schools, as well as their outdoor space. And those are really driven by 4 statewide school construction bonds that, if you've lived here for a number of years, you probably voted on one or more of those. And you can see they're all in the $6, $7 to $10 billion range, right? And then in the middle there, you've got local bonds. And these are bonds that California school districts put before their voters and then pass and then, of course, sell to raise revenue, capital revenue, to improve or build new on their school facilities, right? And you can see what we calculated there was about $66 billion. So that's the bulk of that is, right, sourced locally. On top of that, going up, you've got developer fees. There are, laws around if you're a housing developer in particular, you're paying developer fees to help pay for that school infrastructure. And then the last one on top of that was a state program that is now not really in existence, but it was called the Deferred Maintenance Program, and the state was providing kind of additional funding to local school districts to address what's called deferred maintenance, and that's basically things that you haven't fixed that really are broken and need to be fixed. And so what's happening right now is that these 2 chunks, fairly significant sources of funds, are gone. They don't exist anymore. So the state is not providing any school infrastructure funding along these lines right now, give or take a small amounts in certain little programs. But in terms of its major program, which is called the School Facility Program, the SFP, those monies are not available. So this, I would say, is, arguably a shock to the system of California school districts. And each district is dealing with that in a different way, right? And who knows how the politics will fall on this, but I will say that there is there's been a lot of push by school districts and others across the state to provide this money again. And you see there on the bottom, Prop 1D, which was 2006. So that's, what's my math? That's 8 years ago. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. 10. Thank you. Oh, even more to the point, 10. 10 years ago, we've had no funding in this, right? I'm more of a social scientist, actually. So we've had no money on this. And so really it's a question about we as Californians, what kind of stewards are we going to be of this public infrastructure that has a lot of implications for things across the spectrum that both I have talked about already and that Sharon talks about, right? I think that's the kind of big question on the table for us as residents of the state, as well as those that sit in the legislature here in Sacramento. There is, if any of you will vote in November, there is likely to be a statewide school construction bond on the ballot in the $9 billion range. And what's interesting about this, I think, and this is a much deeper discussion, is that the issue of funding, both local and state funding coming together to pay for our school facilities and kind of keep them operating and build new ones when we have enrollment growth, has been a bipartisan issue for the most part. It's been something that everyone has supported. A, it's a feel-good thing, but B, it's something folks have seen in Sacramento across the aisle that this is really needed. We can't not build new schools. We're growing like crazy, et cetera. But we're actually in now a whole different situation, whereas a bond has qualified for the November ballot, but so far, Governor Brown has come out on record saying that he is against it. And I cannot remember the last time in the state of California where we had this happening. And so this is a really important potential shift. Who knows how much the voters might listen to Governor Brown versus say, oh no, we actually really do support this. That remains to be seen. So at Berkeley, we've been really curious about this. And so we were like, okay, if there's no funding, what does this mean for California school districts? And so a handful of months ago, we released a study called Going It Alone. Essentially, can California's K-12 districts adequately and equitably fund their school facilities without this state support, right? And unfortunately, what we found in the analysis, and I'll talk about it in just a second, is really it's sort of a structural pattern of underinvestment in this infrastructure that, we think over time is clearly harming children in terms of health and safety, but it's also not adequately supporting the education goals that we have. And very briefly what we found, we looked at all school district spending for 5 years going back on facility maintenance and operations, as well as capital spending. And very quickly, if you're a school district and you spend on your facilities and your grounds really out of two budgets. One is your main budget, or usually called your operating budget, right, which is pays your teachers, buys your books, et cetera. And maintenance and operations, for the most part, comes out of that, right? That's paying your custodial, that's paying like smaller things that break and all this stuff. And then you've got your capital budget, which is what those monies I was talking about before is really, but that's really like your, it's usually bond funded, it's doing large renovations, it's what you would build a new school on, it's capital infrastructure, right, dollars. So what we did was estimate for every school district in the state what they should be spending, given the size of their inventory of buildings and infrastructure, what they should be spending at a real minimum on maintenance and operations just to keep their buildings at like a industry standard sort of norm of operating, right? And we made some assumptions of that being like the floor. Like if you drove a car, and the car analogy seems to work, if you drove a car and you didn't do any of the oil changes, you didn't do any of those little things, how is it going to operate at the end of the year or at the end of 2 years, right? If you never changed your oil, at what point in time is the car just going to like stop or throw you out the window, right? So we did that for both M&O and for capital spending, and then said, okay, had the data on what school districts have been spending in those categories and compared the two. And what we found is that only 38% of the public school districts in California, there's about 1,000 of them, met each year the maintenance and operations benchmark. Only 38%. So if only 38% of you are doing the maintenance on your car, what does that mean for us as a population of people who own cars? Now looking at what we call capital renewal, but it's on the capital side, right? Only 43% of districts met this capital renewal benchmark. So same question, right? But nearly 40% of districts are falling short on both benchmarks. This is really troubling to us in terms of what kind of stewards are we of this infrastructure, and how will this infrastructure be able to do the kinds of things that Sharon talked about, right? And this is the point where I have to say, I am not trying to be a Debbie Downer here. Because all your faces, you see these wonderful pictures and they're amazing, right? And we have to sort of get to the reality of like, how do we make that happen, and how do we make that happen for as many, if not all children as absolutely possible, right? And then the last finding that we found in this was, I thought was really intriguing to me, and it really speaks to the equity issues of this, right? Looking at M&O, maintenance and operations, and capital, and M&O is blue, and the capital spending is green. What we found is that facility needs place higher burdens on districts serving more low-income students, right? And what this is this is dividing all school districts in California by the percentage of children that qualify for free and reduced price lunch. So it's dividing them into quintiles by student poverty levels, right? And so on your right is so the highest poverty, right? And what you can see is that the blue spending, the M&O, is higher per student in the highest poverty districts, right? So at first you say, oh, okay, great. They're doing what they need to be doing, right? They're fixing their schools, they're doing the oil changes, et cetera. But then look at the green bar, is that on the capital side, it's lower per student, so in these two highest poverty districts. But digging into that more deeply, what we suspect is that the districts serving more low-income kids are actually kind of undercapitalized, if you will, right? Because there's some relationships between community wealth in terms of property values and the poverty of the families that serve in the school districts serve, right? So what we concluded from this is there's a lot of it suggests that these districts are actually pulling more money out of their operating budget, which is what they pay for program, what they pay for teachers and books, et cetera, to pay for things in facilities that they're not able to do with their capital dollars because they don't have enough of them, right? So they're dealing with emergency kinds of repairs, things they like have to take care of. So this seems like it's almost like a double whammy to these lower income school districts, and we're continuing to kind of look in that. So what our conclusion was, getting back to kind of the larger political question in the state about, is the state going to sort of put up more money for this infrastructure? What we were really concerned about is, okay, it looks like districts going it alone are really going to struggle, right? So if that whole bottom of that bar is out, that state money, those numbers are likely to go down as well. So this seems inconsistent with broader policies, broader goals of education finance and the local control funding formula, which we can talk about in a second. But it also raises a lot of concerns about the role of this as infrastructure. So getting more concretely to the stuff Sharon talked about, and hopefully we'll talk about it in the discussion, is that there's a lot of challenges this creates, obviously, but one of the things that has happened, which I think has a real direct implication around living schoolyards, is the rapid growth that we had in the 80s, and in the enrollment growth that we had in the 80s and 90s in particular. We did a lot to address that, right? I mean, Los Angeles Unified built 130 schools over the last decade to address enormous enrollment growth, and so did all those districts around there in particular. But part of the strategy to address that is putting in portable classrooms, right? And so this is more or less what they look like. You've probably seen them. I mean, in high school, I went to classes in portable classrooms. But the thing about portable classrooms is that they certainly do have a lot of benefits, but there's also a lot of trade-offs with that as well, because where do you put them? They don't go on the roof of the existing buildings. They go on the schoolyard. And so they take up space that otherwise needs to be used for, the athletic program or the physical activity program that, there are standards around that CDE folks can talk more specifically about, or, other kinds of schoolyard spaces. And so, here's a great example. This picture on the bottom is actually from Washington, D.C., but it's a great example of portables taking up space. And we actually don't know how many portables we have across the state of California. I have estimated with my friends at CDE that it's at least 75,000 portable classrooms across the state. And each portable is one classroom, essentially. So to that point is that, and I'm kind of like a systemic guy. Like, I like the big policy stuff. I like, how do you scale these interventions? I love the individual projects. I love that. And that's where we learn. That's where we incubate this stuff. And I'm really interested in, like, how do we make this systemic? How do we make this how the rules of the game are played? How do we make this that every school board member that gets elected is like, yeah, of course we need living schoolyards. Of course we need X, Y, and Z. They're thinking about those things. It's just what you're supposed to do. So from a statewide perspective, we do not have an inventory of our K-12 schools. And this slide is not unfinished. The policy work and the legislative work to do that is what the unfinished thing is. We actually don't know how many buildings we have. We don't know the ages of them. We don't know what's on their sites. So if any of you want to spend the next year in your free time doing that, perhaps through Google Maps, and putting together a database that we might work from, talk to me after this, because we desperately need it. So getting into issues of standards and guidance or technical assistance, as Sharon said, I really believe this must be cross-sector, and some of the partners that have been working on this are in the room, because what I see across the state and talking with districts, it's highly unlikely that every school district in California, or even the vast majority of them, would have the technical expertise to do much of this. So of course you have, Bay Tree Design and others that, bring that to the fold. But there's a really important state role in providing the guidance. I mean, there's the blueprint for ecological literacy, and the CDE, for example, provides a lot of various guidance on things like school design, both indoor and outdoor space, and the state plays a really big role, in my opinion, in spreading those best practices, right? Because the districts look to the state, and particularly to the Department of Education. And one of the studies that we just finished was working with CDE to look at across the country, what do other states do on K-12 school facility standards and guidelines. And we actually did not look at outdoor space. We looked at indoor educational space, like square footages per student, and what kinds of classrooms need to be in schools, and all of this. And what you find is that states are all over the board in terms of what they require or suggest to school districts. But there's a real kind of open question, and this is where I'd be curious about the folks that have kind of worked on more of the stormwater stuff or more of the sustainable community stuff. Like, there's a spectrum of really hard standards that a local entity has to follow, of course, whether it's on curb cuts or other things, across, strong guidance, best practices, vague recommendations, et cetera. And so I think on school facilities, because, school districts are really locally controlled entities, each state has sort of a unique culture about what they do. And I hope my CDE colleagues here will talk kind of about what CDE is sort of obligated to uphold in terms of what's in the law, sort of what's really not addressed in the law, and what they're seeing across the state. So pointing to opportunities as well, I would say that, one of the important documents in school facilities planning that districts do is called educational specifications. And this is the document where a district says, okay, here's our goal, here's our education program, here's what we wanted, how that we want that to translate into to design, and then architects use that to come up with the designs. And it seems like that's a real interesting opportunity or vehicle to embed or weave in some of these living schoolyard ideas, or all of them, frankly. And it would be interesting, you know, what would that look like? What would an example of that look like? And perhaps someone has seen that. You know, so this is the kind of work that we've been fortunate enough to assist or partner with CDE on, and some of the other partners in the room. We have held a number of working groups and convenings with the Strategic Growth Council, the Health and All Policies Task Force, Department of Public Health, and the California Department of Education, coming together around some of this stuff, particularly the catalyst being some of the SB 375 related issues, but saw a real opportunity between a couple of things that were happening in the state, which was the Office of, and OPR, the Office of Governor's Office of Planning and Research. OPR has been working on updating the general plan guidelines to cities, right? And so that doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every year, actually, either. And CDE, Department of Ed, was really interested in updating, reviewing and possibly updating their standards and guidelines to school districts, which are called, which we affectionately refer to them as Title V in the California Code of Regulations. Those stars aligning and happening at the same time are like, you know, a lunar eclipse that only happens once a year. And so what we were trying to do, and what they have, I think, had some successes in doing, and I'd love to hear them more talk about that, but was, can we be sending more of the same messages to both local governments and school districts on design-related issues, particularly around siting or adjacencies around new schools and modernizations, et cetera. And so I think they've had successes in doing that. Last couple of points I'll make is that on the another opportunity, I think, to sort of bake this into local work is around, at the school district level, is around what's called the LCAP, or the Local Control and Accountability Plan, which is a fairly new thing. I think we're now in the third year of it, but this is the plan I guess you could call it, I guess it's called a plan. It's the document that California school districts have to put together that identifies how they're going to meet a variety of state priorities in this green box here that the State Board of Ed has outlined. And they can add priorities to that, but they have to show how their budget is aligned, set up to meet those priorities. Lots of detail involved in that. I'm assuming most people aren't educators in here, but we could go into a second. But that's part of the local control funding formula that the governor has been a strong supporter of and helped roll through. But in addition to addressing these state priorities, local school districts may add their own, and we've seen some districts doing that. And they could easily add, and I have not seen much of that, but they could really add in locally made priorities around the outdoor environments at schools, particularly around living schoolyards. And I think they could sort of bake that in with the local process. And actually, this is, in my opinion, the LCAP is really one of the first times that some of this, what's been called facilities in good repair, although that's a very sort of a limited concept, has been kind of baked into the sort of planning requirements of local school districts. But anyway, I think there's an opportunity to bake that in there at the local level, and it would be great for the CDE to work with other agencies and or nonprofits who could really provide guidance to local districts and others on how you might do that. So I would like to wrap up because I would like to hear more from you all. But these are some of my thoughts and observations on kind of what's possible, sort of what some of the big challenges are in thinking about living schoolyards, and particularly as it applies to sort of all of our K-12 infrastructure right across the state. And so, questions of mine that come to mind, and hopefully you'll add to these and improve on these, but it's like, given the underfunding that we have on this infrastructure, can new money be brought to the table? And Sharon alluded to some of these programs, right, that have been happening. What does that mean for an ongoing thing going forward? Can we develop good guidance examples, technical assistance templates, et cetera? And, and equity is always forefront of my mind, is how do we scale this and make it so that, all students have opportunities to attend schools that have these kinds of environments. And particularly, one of the things I find particularly compelling is there's some new research looking at, and Sharon knows a little better than I, but looking at the ways in which, experiences in nature, just even seeing trees and green space, reduces stress and anxiety in children. And I think, it sort of has direct relations to, you know, sort of equity issues and kind of environments, you know, children are experiencing in outside of school, and how can we sort of mitigate some of those on the school campus when they're there 6, 7, or 8 hours a day. So I hope that you will have others. So with that, I would turn it back over to Jeffrey or to Sharon to sort of have conversations. And I'll put up the email if folks have online questions. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, if you all want to stay nearby, I guess I'll just kind of summarize by saying thank you to both of you for very informative presentations. I think, you know, the takeaway from Sharon's presentation is, wow, how cool and inspiring, and I think we can all agree that we would love to see something along those lines in our school districts. And then Jeff, of course, we need money for it, and there's already this existing hole of deferred maintenance. We got school bonds that aren't quite making it through, or would maybe be directed towards school modernization. You know, the reason I was inspired to kind of try to bring this seminar together was, you know, I think the interest is out there. There's definitely desire to do this kind of stuff, but we have nonetheless our siloed interests. We have there's existing barriers. I know that we have some of the players in the room today, and hopefully a lot of more folks that have joined us online that I think can hopefully kind of come together and see if we can't put some effort behind this, and maybe see what barriers we can break down, and see if we can't find some successes. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all to raise your hand, and if you have some questions to help you know, kind of get this conversation going, I would encourage you all. And Sharon, yeah, please go ahead and jump in, and we have some microphones roaming around. Just please wait till you have one. But yeah, go ahead.
As Jeff was talking, I thought of two other things I wanted to add, and one is to recognize the great work being done in the Green Ribbon Schools program. And I should have listed that originally in the list of things that are fabulously happening to start to support this movement. And Leslie Taylor, who's in the room, is also working on that project. So it's fabulous, and part of the structural support that the California Department of Education is providing that encourages this work both on the grounds and in the building. And then also, as Jeff was talking, I wanted to add on the funding piece that I've been working with an environmental economist whose name is Dr. Bevan Ashenmiller, and she is a professor at Occidental College, and together we're working on a cost-benefit analysis of schoolyard greening programs that are citywide. And in our thought that we're looking to be able to quantify the cost to design, construct, maintain, and train people to use these spaces, and then the benefits that accrue to children's health, academic achievement, and ecological system services. And that the studies that we've seen thus far that are on individual pieces of that are very positive, are in a positive direction, and we think that when you sum those positives, you should get a very positive number. But the benefits, as Bevan points out, accrue to more than just the school. They accrue to the neighborhood, they accrue to the children, they accrue to the parents, they accrue to the environment. And so part of the funding model that I believe is important, in addition to having some of the funds, maybe it's tough to have the funds come from the school budgets, which are already so strapped, but I think that we should be tapping into and reaping, if we're generating benefits for society, we should be getting funds to do those things from other sources. And that's why it's so fabulous to see DROPS grants programs investing in stormwater infrastructure. You know, that will benefit the stormwater infrastructure of those neighborhoods and the kids at the same time. So it's the beauty of the multi-benefit project, and we're looking to create more of that multi-benefit environment.
Excellent. And Sharon, if you could go back a slide, go back to where that email address is. So the email address that we're going to be monitoring for the next few minutes till the end of the hour is the storms, STORMS, at waterboards.ca.gov. Should be up there. There it is. How about that? Excellent. But yeah, I think we have a few in-room questions. Go ahead and.
So my question relates to STEM. STEM is a part of one of the practices that can be used to meet your LCAP requirements. I'm wondering if you've been able to use your Green Schoolyards programs in terms of developing STEM programs as curriculum or extracurricular activities.
Yeah, STEM work is definitely connected to what schools do with their living schoolyards. I personally am a city planner by training, so I'm not a teacher, but I'm working with a principal to run a professional development program to train principals in managing school grounds, and part of what our Principals Institute participants are interested in is exactly that, is using their grounds to teach STEM and STEAM and all the other academically curriculum-tied things that they want to do. We would like to see the grounds help schools do what they're already trying to do more easily and with more resources easily available right outside their door, whether that's improving kids' mental health, physical health, or academic achievement.
Well, and for the folks that work in this building, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And then sometimes now it's called STEAM, right? Adding an A for arts. But that's been a big push by educators to kind of bulk up those courses in schools.
Is there any more in-room questions? Got a couple here.
You. My name is Becky Steinbruner. I'm here from Santa Cruz County. And last night I attended the local water district board meeting. And there was an interesting discussion. They offered schools money to do free retrofits, but they didn't get any takers because they didn't have anybody at the school that had the time to do the paperwork. I think that's a sad comment. And so in the school district, Santa Cruz City School District, a lot of those issues have been accomplished through parent volunteer. And there are hundreds of hours that parents put in because, simply put, the teachers and administrators just don't have the time. One thing that I want to bring out about the DROPS grant program is that it was, I called together in my community a tri-county information meeting for the DROPS grant. And it is a great program, but it is heavily biased towards Southern California. And Santa Cruz County, we just don't have quite the level of, I guess, drought that Southern California has. So I just want to point out that there's some inequity within the state for school districts that were maybe not at the table when the law was written. I really enjoyed your presentation showing the pictures from around the world. That was marvelous. And what comes to my mind is that my kids have said play structures just aren't fun. There's no challenge. It's all plastic that's hot. And I think it's kind of supported by a bunch of helicopter parents and, and teachers who are so afraid kids are going to get hurt that they won't let them have any fun. And so how do you see parent volunteers who are really going to do a lot of this work to try and push to make changes? How do we effectively work with administrators and state level legislatures who might be to convince them that this is a real need and that kids aren't going to die? Thank you.
Well, I think, the first part of your question really resonated, or first part of your comment about districts, not having the staff capacity to do the paperwork is really important. And that's why, again, I do point to the unique role of the state in trying to help that. I mean, there's obviously a long debate about the cumbersome nature of various state programs. But I think for school districts in particular, I mean, we have school district, our biggest school district is LAUSD, right, which is 800 or so thousand kids still, or 600,000. And our smallest one is like 5 kids or something, 5 or 8. And we have everything in between. And so, you quite often have people doing the facility related work who are also, running the entire budget, or they're also doing, so I think that's a really unique aspect of this. And so it's how can we make it, most streamlined at the state level. And that's why I think the state should really play a role on assisting districts with the planning, with best practices and all of those things, because of, just to spread the knowledge. But your point's really well taken, and it's something to always think about in this.
And to comment on the risk conversation that you talked about, that's a topic near and dear to my heart. I just did a radio interview on that topic for Kenny Ballantyne's Nature Kids program that's online. But the International School Grounds Alliance that I'm a member of is very interested in that and has been tracking it, and we are very close to coming out with a joint statement on the value of beneficial risk, an internationally signed document by 15 countries. Because it's not just, we probably have the honor of being the worst in terms of overprotectiveness, but it's definitely prevalent everywhere. We talk about helicopter parenting here. In England, it's children wrapped in cotton wool. In Canada, it's bubble-wrapped kids. Sweden talks about curling parents who smooth the way for their kids to follow, and Taiwan talks about children as members of the strawberry tribe who look good but stand up to no pressure. Right? So, it's the same, it's this issue that's repeated, and we are a country of most of us, of immigrants who were daring and crossed the world to come here, not, either last generation or many generations ago, and where has it gone, right? So I think it's a core identity issue, and that parents are moving from a place of care when they are overprotecting their kids. But what we're working on is getting the health agency community to start surfacing the research in a way that's public, because I think school districts and parents will listen when health professionals and pediatricians stand up and say kids need to jump off high places. They need to know about boundaries. They need to get some scrapes along the way and learn through graduated challenges. And we do have doctors who stand up for that, and public health departments are also starting to. And we hope Green Schoolyards America hopes to be partnering with some of them soon. And if you go to our website in the future, hopefully you'll see some of that work there. It's not there yet, but it's in the works. I agree. Yeah.
Excellent. I think we have one more in-room question, then we'll bounce to some email questions.
Great, thank you. Leanne Dillon, I staff the Health and All Policies Task Force. This is fantastic, Sharon. So great to meet you and hear from your work. And Jeff, always good to see you. I have a lot of questions, so I'll pare it down to a couple, and you don't have to feel like you have to answer them. But one for me, kind of building off what your question was, is Sharon, in your work, who really are the key linchpin champions that are able to make this stuff happen at the end of the day? Is it the school board? Is it the parent-teacher group? Is it the school facilities director? And then another question I had is, what do green or living schoolyards, what do they look like in the Coachella Valley? What do they look like in the San Joaquin Valley, Central Valley, Eastern Sierras? Those pictures were gorgeous and amazing, and from lots of places that have lots of water. And we don't have so much of that. And then I guess another question that I was just curious about, I think a lot of the photos I saw also were of like elementary schools, and what does this movement and concept mean in a high school environment? I'll stop there. But thank you both.
Remind me of the first one again. I'm sorry.
The first one was, who are the key champions that you're seeing are actually the ones who can make this happen? And I think it gets to Jeff's point about equity. If parents are really who's going to have to drive this, that we're going to have an issue in communities where parents are working a lot out of the house and not able to kind of engage in that way.
Yeah, I think that it has been parents in the past, and that just for the reasons that you're saying should not be the only ones who are involved in the future. I mean, when, again, my colleague Bevan Eschenmiller surfaced a map of like where the climate change predictions for LA for example, and the areas that are expected to get the hottest coincide with the lowest income schools. Right, so there's equity concerns there from climate change perspective that the region should be concerned about and should act on, and that should come through in the funding and the organization. And I think that these projects don't work when it's only bottom up or top down, and that participatory design is key, building things that people want to use, that put resources there that serve their own educational program and recreational style and climate, as you were alluding to, is vital. And funding it and supporting it from the district level, from the local public agency partnerships, from the institutional scale. It's part of why we're also training principals and professional development in this area, because the principal is a key leader within the schools, and if they don't understand how and why this is of use to them, then it's not doesn't stay as long. I think our field is great at starting these projects, and what we're working on as a nonprofit is helping this be a sustainable system, looking for the points that we need to support. And then to your point about places with less water, certainly. I mean, I think that this is a worldwide movement. There are places all over. Our Midwest guide for Living Schoolyard Month has winter activities in it as well. And, and Sweden and Norway have fire pits in all of their schoolyards because they take kids outside in the middle of winter. And so from preschool on up, they all have fire. In Japan, they all have swimming pools because it's hot. Preschool on up. So the same thing here in our dry climates, you would be doing plants that are appropriate. You'd probably be doing a lot more shade and things like that are climate adaptive and that serve climate change mitigation and stormwater. And then grade levels, certainly high schools are involved. My pictures do skew toward the younger kids, but the Casa Grande High School was in there. I think the theme is basically the older the child, the more they can be involved in directing the project in its entirety. And so with the younger kids, you're giving them opportunities and leading them along and letting them grow with their own opportunities and abilities. And at the high school level, you're asking them to how they would like to solve a problem, having them to identify what they see that needs change and then be the change makers for that issue, to learn in a positive, small way how you can change your place for the better.
Anything else for you, Jeff?
No, not. But I would love to hear from the Department of Education about issues around safety. I mean, I'm putting them on notice if they would. But I'd be curious if there were things from the European examples that perked your ears up, like, ooh, that would be hard to do here in this country from a safety perspective or something. Because I don't know. I'm kind of curious. But
Can I add that safety and liability are different things, right?
Is it on? Good. Hi, I'm Michael O'Neill from the School Facilities Division. I don't know if I can answer the specifics, but obviously safety is one, if not the highest priority, one of the two highest priorities for educational facilities, the other being educational appropriateness. So safety is always at the forefront, and outdoor activity, play yard areas. There are some standards that exist from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And they're very tight, and the insurance liability issues for school districts are very real. They typically will inspect and follow all of the guidance as to the materials and the distances and the heights and spaces between bars. All of that is very well for their own liability issues are followed. Now, I can't speak to, for physical education, kids have to meet a minimum of number of minutes per week, and they're supposed to meet a number of activities from, gymnastics to rhythm to a number of activities, and they can meet that in a number of ways. It can be indoor, outdoors, those types of things. So I don't know if I'm dancing around your question, but
I think so. What would you need to be able to go a little further out of the usual comfort zone for Department of Education to expand that, to be able to do some more? I think most of the things I showed actually meet our code. So that I should say that first. There are very few things there that don't. Most of those things are rules around how high can you jump from, which is a gut check kind of thing of the person watching rather than an actual code. But I wonder what would it take? What would you need? What would be helpful to have to help you expand what you let kids do?
I really don't know. I haven't really thought about that. You know, there's also the ADA requirements too for the design of, you know, if there's rocks in an area, can they navigate it? Can they get across? You know, these would be local choices, and I'm not sure if we at the Department of Education could tell them that, oh, you can exceed a certain other standard or guidance on that. So.
From what I have seen and heard in the field in the U.S. and abroad is that this breaks down often into a long-term health versus short-term health question, because in protecting children from scrapes, we're setting them up for diabetes. And so it's a question of the public health department see that research, and they are coming out in greater numbers to stand behind the reasons to be increasing physical health, physical activity. And also I've heard recently from a public health department a statement about the value of nature and being such that for urban kids, particularly in lower income areas that have high rates of trauma in their personal life, to not have greenery is hugely detrimental, and to add greenery in actually offsets the mental health services that they might need. And so there are lots of positive health things I think that play into this. Yeah.
Well, I promised we would get to some of the email questions. I believe we have more than we can probably get through in the next few minutes, trying to get us to end on time here. And I also have some of my own parting thoughts I wanted to plug in here, so I'm going to go ahead and let Rachel read a couple of good questions here.
Okay, so we have two that are 3 or 4 that are actually related, specifically discussing maintenance in these types of landscapes are very different from the traditional school landscapes that are generally very low maintenance. How do you get educational districts and school maintenance crews to jump on board with these types of landscapes? One of the other questions that was linked is, what are the best methods for getting my local school district and more specifically my neighborhood schools involved?
So for the maintenance question, I think the answer is different in each country and each place, but the places that are most successful are the ones that tie their facilities needs in with their academic needs. And they have facilities departments collaborating with the key academic leadership in the school districts. And so the facilities, yes, still sees it as maintenance, but it's also stewardship and it's academic resource provision, as well as recreation. So it I don't know, it changes the buckets, I guess, of how you think about where the money is from. It's money that is for resource acquisition and development also. And then some school districts abroad have staffs like a park department. It's basically a transition from a school district land having minimal care, beyond minimal care, as you're talking about in a lot of the economic climate, to one that's more like a park district and has park district type staff that can take care of other types of settings. That happens in many places, but I think there's also room for children and adults to be stewards of these places. In Asia, there are no janitors or custodians. All the kids in Taiwan and Japan take care of the school inside and out except for heavy tasks. They each spend 5 minutes a day, but if you have 400 children at 5 minutes a day, you have a very clean schoolyard. So there are lots of choices.
Or is that...
I have one more, and then there's a couple that I actually am going to make sure that Sharon and Jeff get, as well as our Department of Education
Yes,
gets.
we will be available to address these after this session. So.
Yeah. So this one is, I'm curious about regulatory constraints or opportunities, particularly in terms of NPDES permits, associated health regulations, for example, ponds. I know there are a lot of issues with water quality standards for contact recreation, and I'm wondering if it's harder in constructed ponds and stormwater. Ponds seem like such a great addition. I have a background in urban environmental planning, et cetera, but also as an employee of a regulatory agency, I am conscious of those barriers.
Ponds are a complicated question. But in the San Francisco Bay Area, for example, the city of San Francisco is surrounded by water on 3 sides. If kids don't understand how to act at the water's edge, they have a greater health hazard than a pond that's usually a foot or 2 deep. So ponds, the San Francisco School District, for example, has decided, maybe 15 years ago when I first started working with them, they were not in favor of ponds, but as their Green Schoolyard program grew, they decided that ponds are fine for schools to have. I believe the standard that they use is 15 inches deep, is allowable without a fence or a gate. And that is a manageable body of water. If a toddler falls in, they sit up, their heads above water. So it does mean that there's more pond maintenance and that the community has to keep an eye on the water quality and the water temperature. In some cases, schools in that city make ponds that are deeper but have a subsurface grate for the deep part, so the fish get the benefit of the greater water pool, but the hazard is not big. The picture I showed you at Coombs, that school has 3 ponds for 40 years at a preschool, and it's their water safety demonstration. So children, again, living in England, surrounded by water, understand water's edge.
Okay, well, with that, we're at time. I did want to go ahead and say a few things on my own, just to round out some of this discussion. And I know we're all looking for resources and how do we do this. Again, I mentioned that I brought people together to see if we can make some collaboration. Just, I guess, school districts on their own, some partnerships that they should consider is, oftentimes resource conservation districts may be a worthy resource. Look out for them. Water conservation districts, Native Plant Society, Tree Foundation. All those folks have a common interest, and folks like that may be willing to partner up and bring some of the necessary resources that you're looking for, if you're interested in pursuing this type of project. From the water board perspective, something on a more large scale, something that you can make note of that I wanted to plug was the SB 985 requirement. This is the new Stormwater Resource Plan requirement that's going to be, a plan must be in place in order to qualify for any voter-approved bond funds. Now, this is really intended for larger scale type projects, but as Sharon mentioned, and I think Jeff also in their presentations, is that schools are large landowners in urban environments. And so the municipalities that are going to be looking to do more large-scale type projects will be looking for places to put these projects. And so this is something that has not been developed well, but I think it's something that needs to be looked into further. So I envision in the future that school districts will be looked at as potential partners in that process. So again, if you want to look into what a stormwater resource plan entails, if you do a search for that, it'll lead you to our website, and you can read more about that. But going back to my stormwater planning unit, as I mentioned, we are implementing the stormwater strategy. We do consider ourselves a resource in this process. We consider ourselves kind of facilitators, trying to break down some barriers, trying to resolve some of the issues that go around stormwater management, of course, on the larger scale regulatory perspective. But even from this point of view, from what we've been presenting today, I'm sure there's still a lot of remaining questions. They'll probably keep coming in. We are a repository for those questions, and I think we're willing to be a resource, a troubleshooter, to help kind of continue this discussion, see what kind of collaboration we can develop. So with that in mind, feel free to continue contacting us, sending questions to there, or contacting me directly, and we will see what we can do to help continue this conversation and push things forward. So with that, I want to thank again Sharon Danks and Jeff Vincent for joining us today. Thank you to the folks in the audience. I know we have some state agencies that made it here, so thank you very much. Thank you to my state water board member, Steve Moore, and Assembly member Phil Ting for joining us, and for everyone on the webcast, thank you for tuning in. And so hopefully it was a productive day for those who joined us.